The concept of remote viewing, RV, essentially the act of perceiving unseen and distant subjects using the mind, focuses on providing information about non-visible objects, events, people, or location. The term remote viewing was introduced by physicists Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff, parapsychology investigators at Stanford Research Institute, SRI, to differentiate it from clairvoyance. Despite previous criticism and debates over its scientific existence, RV resurfaced in the public consciousness in the 1990s due to the disclosure of the U.S. government-funded Stargate project's documents. Nevertheless, the program did not yield any viable military applications and was subsequently concluded. Historically, RV got its roots in the studies of psychic phenomena, which initiated in the mid-19th century by acclaimed scientists such as Michael Faraday and Alfred Russel Wallace. They performed rigorous experiments on ostensibly psychically gifted individuals, albeit the positive results were met with overwhelming skepticism as the study evolved. It shied away from specific individuals and moved towards larger populations. Yet, fear of criticism from mainstream scientists kept this area confined to the scientific periphery. A shift occurred in the 1960s, however, when the emerging New Age thinking, coupled with the popularity of human potential movement, led to a renewed public fascination around the study of consciousness and psychic phenomena. This renewed interest facilitated a slight easing in funding restrictions and opened avenues for more research into the realm of psychic phenomena. During the early 1990s, Colonel William Johnson was appointed by the Military Intelligence Board to oversee the Remote Viewing Unit, a department focused on exploring supernatural capabilities for defense purposes. The project's funding was, however, cut in late 1994, leading to its gradual decline. The CIA took over from the DIA in 1995, enlisting the help of the American Institutes for Research, IRR, to retrospectively evaluate the results of the project. Despite some evidence of a noteworthy effect with certain subjects displaying statistical successes, the program faced criticism and skepticism around the validity of the results. Notably, Ray Hyman argued against the claim that the existence of extrasensory perception, SB, had been proven, indicating the need for independent replication of the experiment's findings and further investigation. Following critical study analyses in 1995, the CIA ended the notably costly project. The Ayers report concluded that the program had failed to produce usable intelligence data, reinforcing the skepticism around the project's credibility and efficacy. Despite criticism, research on remote viewings continued at other institutions like the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, PRAIR, who conducted extensive trials throughout the late 70s and 80s. However, this research too faced criticism for deviating from accepted scientific research standards. In an effort to respond to these critiques, PRAIR attempted to replicate previous experiments with a more analytical methodology, replacing human judgment. Although they reported consistency in results, the validity of the experiments continued to face scrutiny, marking the broader narrative of skepticism and controversy around these exploration of ESP in defense intelligence. Psychologist Ray Hyman argues that the design of remote viewing experiments is insufficiently rigorous to provide any useful data. Despite potential repeatability of the experiment's results, Hyman maintains they fail to conclusively prove the existence of psychic functioning. He attributes this outcome to the experimental emphasis on negative evidence. That is, SP claims rely on the inability to explain experiment results by normal means. Hyman insists these experiments lack an underpinning positive theory to guide their conduct, and decries the lack of such theory in parapsychology. Furthermore, Hyman criticizes the quality and volume of experimentation, suggesting insufficient to persuade the scientific community to reconsider their fundamental principles. This criticism is augmented by Martin Gardner's revelation of influential researcher Harold Puthoff's prior engagement with Scientology. He argues this association holds sway over Puthoff's research at Stanford University. In fact, the Church of Scientology publicized a letter by Puthoff arguing in favor of Scientology's technological sophistication and aligning it with modern corporate planning and applied technology. According to Gardner, Puthoff's research included support for theosophy, inspired beliefs in remote viewing atomic structures. Skeptic Michael Shermer identified flaws in the target selection within remote viewing experiments. Shermer further highlights biases prevalent in these experiments and others like them. He, along with various skeptical organizations, conducted experiments of their own and found no evidence to substantiate paranormal claims under controlled conditions. Additionally, psychologists David Marks and Richard Kaman's attempts to replicate the famed experiments of Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff at the Stanford Research Institute were unsuccessful. Investigation revealed that the presentation of information to original experiment judges had been manipulated, resulting in unfairly high success rates. The written accounts contain mostly genuine attempts from participants to communicate their observations. These accounts also comprised a substantial amount of unrelated information that could guide a judge in aligning them accurately with the suitable objectives. Particular references were to dates, venues, and past incidences that assisted in structuring the accounts orderly. Surprisingly, the judges. In Target, Marks observes that after the removal of the signals, the success rate dropped to that of chance remarkably. Marks achieved a 100% success rate by merely observing the signals and not visiting any of the sites. Critics, including James Randi, have noted that controls employed by other researchers were unable to yield positive results. Sources of misinformation contained in the original tests were eliminated. Marks and Kaman concluded that remote viewing remains speculative without empirical verification. In 1980, Charles Tart claimed that a reassessment of the transcripts showed a higher than random result. Targ and Puthoff once again declined to provide copies of the transcripts until 1985. These transcripts still contain sensory signals. Marks and Christopher Scott, 1986, criticized Tart for failing to perform the basic task of accurately removing cues from the accounts. They concluded that remote viewing had not been proven by Puthoff and Targ's experiments, only their persisting failure to eradicate sensory signals. The information extracted from the Stargate project's remote viewing sessions was ambiguous and littered with incorrect and irrelevant data. It was never productive in any intelligence operation, and there were suspicions that project managers might have altered the reports to match background cues. In his book, The Psychology of the Psychic 2000, Marks critically discusses the shortcomings of the Stargate project. He mentioned 6 negatives: failure to eliminate potential cues, the possibility of sensory leakage, lack of independent validation, unavailability for peer review due to some experiments being conducted confidentially. Marks raised the issue of a major conflict of interest as the judge Edwin May was also the project's lead investigator. He concluded that it was nothing but a subjective delusion, devoid of any scientific support for remote viewing. Marks also proposed that the participants of such experiments were experiencing subjective validation, a process of perceived connections between random stimuli. David Marks scrutinized the early efforts of remote viewing, with particular attention to the work produced by Targ and Puthoff at Stanford Research Institute during the 1970s. Marks' critique was largely based on his discovery of sensory cues and modifications in the original scripts. Uri Geller, the prime subject of Targ and Puthoff's study at the Stanford Research Institute, was a key figure central to Marks' analysis.